He's one of the most recognizable and, let's be honest, feared leaders on the planet. We see him as a caricature, a tyrant, a madman with his finger on the button. But the real story of how Kim Jong Un grabbed absolute power is way more bizarre and complicated than you might think. All right, let's get into it.
I mean, that's really the question, isn't it? It's what keeps analysts and world leaders up at night. Because before he was the all-powerful supreme leader, he was just a quiet kid, a kid in a fancy European boarding school, with a very specific and very American obsession. I mean, look at this. The contrast is just wild. On one side, you have a shy kid, kind of awkward, who couldn't get enough of the NBA and apparently couldn't care less about politics. And on the other, a ruthless dictator with a nuclear arsenal who literally executed his own family members. So how do you get from point A to point B? To even begin to understand that transformation, you have to go back to his early days. Because here's the thing you have to remember. Kim Jong Un was never supposed to be in charge. From the very beginning, his life is wrapped in state propaganda. Seriously, we're not even 100% sure when he was born. Intelligence agencies point to 83 or 84, but North Korea says it's 1982. And why? Well, it's all about the symbolism. That year makes his birth line up perfectly with his grandfather's 70th and his father's 40th. In this dynasty, the myth is everything. So get this. While he was in school in Switzerland, using a fake name, nobody remembered him for being a political genius. Nope, they remembered him for his love of basketball. Classmates said he'd spend hours meticulously drawing Michael Jordan. He was just a teenager who loved the Chicago Bulls and Jackie Chan movies. And remember, he was the spare, not the heir. His older half-brother, Kim Jong Un, was the one being groomed for the top job. But that all went sideways in 2001, when Jong Nam got caught using a fake passport to get into Japan. Apparently, he just really wanted to go to Tokyo Disneyland. I'm not kidding. That one embarrassing trip pretty much destroyed his chances and opened the door for his younger brother. So, the door swings open, and the unlikely successor steps through. But once his father dies, and he's in charge, how does he hold on to power? Well, the answer is, he moves fast, and with terrifying brutality. His power grab was unbelievably quick. Just months after his father's funeral, he had all the top party and military titles locked down. But the real shocker, the move that made everyone realize this was a new game, came in late 2013. He had his own uncle, Jang Song-taek, the man everyone thought would guide him, publicly arrested and executed. And his uncle's executions wasn't just a one-off. Oh no, it was the public kickoff to a horrifying purge. Kim went after anyone and everyone he thought could be a threat, cementing his power not just with titles, but with pure, cold fear. And just in case anyone missed the message, North Korean state media blasted this chilling warning across the country. It was a public service announcement, really. The meaning was crystal clear. Absolute loyalty, or you're next. The purges didn't stop at the border. In 2017, his older half-brother, Kim Jong Nam, the Disneyland fan who was supposed to be the heir, was assassinated in a Malaysian airport with a VX nerve agent. It was the final, brutal move to wipe out any other possible claimant to the throne.
All right, so he's got an iron grip on power. Now what? What's his actual game plan? Well, he basically laid out a strategy that's all about balancing two very different, almost contradictory goals.
He called it Byongjin, and you really have to understand this policy to understand his entire reign. The idea is simple. Go full steam ahead on developing nuclear weapons and the economy at the same time. The nukes are meant to keep the outside world at bay, while a better economy is supposed to give his rule legitimacy at home.
And he was not messing around with the nuclear part of that plan. Just look at these numbers. They're staggering. In about a decade, Kim Jong Un launched more than 7 times the number of ballistic missiles as his father and grandfather did combined. This wasn't just continuing their work, it was a massive, aggressive acceleration.
But here's the other side of that Byongjin coin. At the same time he's launching all these missiles, he's also pouring money into Pyongyang. He's building ski resorts, fancy water parks, gleaming new apartment buildings. It was all about creating this image of modernity and success for the country's elite, even as international sanctions were strangling the economy.
So, this dual strategy
This weird mix of nuclear defiance and trying to build a consumer paradise, it set the stage for his next and maybe most shocking chapter, his big debut on the world stage. After years of threats and missile tests, Kim just flipped a switch in 2018. He suddenly wanted to talk. It was a total shock to everyone. But it was probably a calculated move. He'd shown the world he had nuclear weapons. Now he could negotiate from what he saw as a position of strength, maybe hoping to trade some of it for an end to those crushing sanctions.
And man, what followed was a diplomatic whirlwind. He literally walked across the border to meet the president of South Korea. He became the first North Korean leader ever to meet a sitting U.S. president in Singapore. Then there was a second summit in Hanoi, and even a surprise handshake at the DMZ. It was an incredible, high-stakes moment in history.
But that thaw didn't last long. The talks in Hanoi collapsed because they couldn't agree on the basics. The U.S. wanted North Korea to give up all its nukes before lifting sanctions, and North Korea wanted a step-by-step deal. When it fell apart, Kim didn't wait around. He pivoted hard, turning his back on the West and running right back to his old friends. And he didn't just pivot, he went all in. He cozied up to China's Xi Jinping and forged a powerful new partnership with Russia's Vladimir Putin, even supplying Moscow with over 1 million artillery shells for the war in Ukraine. Then he made it official. He completely abandoned the idea of reunification with South Korea, declaring them a formal enemy. The era of diplomacy was officially dead.
So, after more than a decade of this, who is Kim Jong Un, really? Well, the answer seems to be a walking, talking contradiction.
This is what makes him so impossible to pin down. You see him publicly apologizing for a disaster, something his father and grandfather would never have done. But he's also the guy sanctioned for running a network of brutal prison camps. He promotes tourism and hugs citizens, but he rules with an iron fist. Both of these images are somehow true at the same time.
That shy kid who spent his time drawing Michael Jordan, he's gone. In his place is an absolute ruler. A shrewd, cunning, and totally ruthless survivor who has outplayed all his rivals, built up a terrifying arsenal, and gone toe-to-toe with the President of the United States.
So, his story isn't over yet, and the world is still trying to figure out his next move. But it all comes down to this, doesn't it? What truly defines him? Is he a modernizer trying to pull his country into the 21st century? Is he just a classic tyrant? Or is every single thing he does, from the missile tests to the handshakes, all about one thing and one thing only: survival?